The Diquis hydroelectric project is a council hydroelectric dam project designed by ICE. The plan was that the Diquis hydroelectric project generate electricity for more than 1 million consumers, making both the Reventazón Dam and the Pirris hydroelectric plant small. Speaking a little more about the project, it includes two tunnels, one powered by gravity and the other with electric waters that will be pumped behind the dam. Palmar Norte is a small town located in the Diquis Valley within a mangrove region where billions of marine life are born. It is the largest wild mangrove region in Central America, established as a forest park in 1977. National Geographic states that one of the last 5 wild places is adjacent to this region, the Osa Peninsula, near the coast of the protected island of Caños. Strong opposition to the project by Mujeres de Osa, Nature Conservancy, Asana, eco-hostels that serve luxury tourism, international travelers who have settled in the area, and nearby communities are against the dam. It is estimated that the project will destroy more than 200 sacred indigenous sites. Some history is that indigenous people have been involved in a dispute over territory for the defense of the resource found on their lands and their cultural peculiarities since the very moment of the conquest and colonization. In this way, the forced displacement of their lands have been a continuous process since the 15th centuries, and it is still present. They were forced to carry out jobs and distribute them as objects through systems such as encomienda, reduction, mita, slavery, and forced displacement to take possession of their lands. During 1970 through 1990, there were a series of demands and struggles from territories that were forming and consolidating the leadership of the indigenous people of Costa Rica. This led to different processes of political organizations that arose due to the tension that existed on their lands. Due to colonization relations, in some cases they were justifying the defense of the territory from the organizations between indigenous people of different people, acquiring a greater indigenous participation against the state and market actions. One of the recent indigenous struggles was in the 2010, which has been protect of the National Forest Finance Fund, MINAI, financed by the business sector and the World Bank, which what they want to seek was that with large corporations compensate, in other words, like they pay to continue polluting. The conflict is that indigenous people have fought against hydropower, which finds fear of destructive environmental and social impacts on the community to be the main argument against the dam. As such, the research discusses the concept of identity in Boruca. The Brunca have been able to visualize their indigenous identity and have developed a successful tourism industry in their community. Furthermore, indigenous identity seems to have become more important in the encounter with hydroelectric development. Indigenous organizations have been pressuring ICE to halt construction plans for the Diquis hydroelectric project. Since the inception, claiming that their rights have been violated, the river basin dam will flood approximately 685 hectares of protected land, forcing members of the Terraba community to leave their homes permanently. A study by the Human Rights Clinic of the University of Texas School of Law published in July 2010 that conclude that Costa Rica has not respect and protect the human rights of its indigenous people in the areas of information, property, representation, and effective participation in the decisions surrounding by the hydroelectric project. ICE has not obtained the effective participation of the indigenous people as required by international law. In March of 2011, the indigenous community filed a lawsuit against ICE, And in April, the United Nations also sent a letter to the Costa Rican government echoing the community's concern indigenous.
The environmental problems. The socio-environmental impacts of dams have been controversial all around the world, but Costa Rica prides itself on being an environmentally conscious country. They say that they support many of the United Nations declarations designed to uphold human rights. In Costa Rica, there is the Diquis hydroelectric project that threatens the way of life of several indigenous tribes who have fought for their rights to the land for more than 40 years since the project was first proposed. So why does Costa Rica claims that it is like very environmentally healthy and conscious if they have been having these problems for several years? This is very ignorant from Costa Rica and the government to say, since they know they've been having these problems and the indigenous tribes have their rights, and it is not fair for them to do this to them. This project began without any valorization of the environmental damage that it would cause or how much money it would cost, so they didn't even care about the environment, neither the indigenous tribes of the area. This was contrasted about the Rio Grande in Teraba, which was a great resource for the population in that area, mainly the indigenous tribes. So they didn't even care about the indigenous tribes or the environment or even their own river. Because of this, the environment was affected negatively big time, and indigenous territories were basically destroyed. They were forcing the tribes to leave their home, and they didn't want to do it. They had been fighting for their rights because they're humans and they have their own rights. They have a right of their territory since they've been there for existence. This project not only destroyed their homes, but also destroyed many of their sacred territories of great importance for them. And all of these territories and that are sacred for them are part of the country's history. So we have to respect that if we want to be a good country. Many of the indigenous tribes had to leave that territory since it was being basically destroyed. There were too many people working in that area and they couldn't live there. Since they were just a few of them, they were basically like 600. It was really hard for them to defend themselves because they had to fight with a lot of people. The ones who stayed there had their resources cut off because they basically used water from that river that they couldn't use anymore, and they were basically being forced to leave the place, but they didn't want to do it. By doing this, they didn't only destroy basically everything of the indigenous tribes, but slowly starting to affect the entire environment of the country, since they were disturbing everything around this useless project. Even though this was bringing nothing but harm, the government did not care about the consequences. This was clearly showing that they weren't thinking about the harm that they were doing towards the impact of the resources. They were only thinking about the money they would make off it. And that shows big influence on what they are thinking in every single project in the country. At the end, everything was cancelled. The ISTA said that it was because they had to make some financial adjustments and because it was not being efficient enough. They ended up wasting a lot of money just to harm the environment and many people that lived there. Even though the reason that it ended was totally selfish and not for the right reasons, at least the indigenous tribes were very happy about it. They even started celebrating, and some of them even started crying about it. They've been fighting for a lot of years and they deserved all of these rights. But now they have to preserve their previous homes because it was very affected by this project. This shows that the government does not care about the people in the country. They only care about the money and about themselves.
The indigenous group and ISE. Well, the indigenous groups are minority compared to the ISE, since they have a lot of power and to bind our society compared to the indigenous group that are hardly heard because of their way of thinking, their culture, and their way of fixing problems. This is a big problem because ISE can have a big influence in the decision of doing or not doing the dam. This has a lot of cons and pros And this is because our society needs this project so that we can have more energy, but at the same time, the indigenous group that live in that area are going to be affected by this because it's not only their territory, but we already have taken a lot of them throughout all the years. If we made this project in their territory, some of the part where they live is going to be a big flood, and the territory will be less. Indigenous people and whites living in the indigenous zone have the same right to say about the ISE project. Well, in the territory of indigenous group, no one besides them should live there because it's their territory. This means that us white people can't live there because it's illegal. But some people break the law and have their houses on their territory. So the big problem is that if they have the same right of expressing how they feel with the construction of the dam as the indigenous group, well, I think they don't have the same right to have an opinion on what to do since they arrived there illegally and they had to be okay with whatever decision is made. I think this because it's their territory, it's the indigenous territory and not the white people territory, so they will have to be comfort with whatever decision is taken.
Position of the rest of the population on the case of the Diquis. There are two majority positions, those in favor of canceling the ISE project and those in favor of doing so. On the side of those who defend the indigenous, their arguments are based on legal and moral issues. Since in Costa Rica indigenous territory is protected and cannot be altered in the way that ISE wanted without a legal agreement, and also because the respect that must be given to these cultures that are maintained in Costa Rica. However, there is also a percentage of people who think that the best thing was to do the project and install the dam. This is because in Costa Rica more and more energy sources are required to avoid that there are no basic electricity service in many houses. So ISE, that is the responsible of this, searching places to make more energy sources like the Diquis and other projects, because there was the objective of ISE at the beginning, so because the statistics show the increase of houses with energy problems, so they are trying to reduce this percentage. Looking of both points of view, we see that one is based on morality and the other one on the best option for the future of the country. This is because in the future the PhD will be helpful and other dams or projects to get energy, because Costa Rica is increasing his population and his technology, so they need more energy and electricity, and the PhD will support many opportunities to easy to start the projects for the future. And well, indigenous really didn't support that for the future, but support culture to the country.
In the part of an opinion on what should be done, the indigenous people relationship to their territories is a human right and the government should know that. The government, with their institutions, affect not only the lands and territories, but also their sociocultural integrity. These actions by the government were made without consulting them. This means that it is a violation of rights. The indigenous people must have a right in all processes, judicial protection, and right to equal protection of the law. First, the ICE project was made occupying tidal indigenous territory in Costa Rica. The Diquis hydroelectric project made them lose a lot of resources, lands, and traditional activities. It is not good to steal their lands and leave them without nothing, because when this happens, create discrimination and culture is lost over time. Also, it is known that non-indigenous people illegally occupy more than 43% of tidal indigenous territories. The government and institutions think that they can control all territories, even if they are not theirs. This situation can keep going because they do not live what indigenous do. In order to fix a violation situation from the government, they themselves must give an economic compensation. This economic rearrangement can be useful for helping them get new territories to live in a gradually return to their activities. This is the best way to return a part of what they lost. Also, the concern that is a committee on the elimination of racial discrimination has expressed deep concern about illegal occupation in indigenous lands in Costa Rica since 1999. No matter what institutions take care about this situation, they keep losing lands. This has created a serious ethnic tension and violence. In some cases, when indigenous leaders try to recover their lands, they kill them. This is a real situation, and we must understand the damage that brings losing lands. It can affect all their life for this reason. It is important that they feel like they are people with a great culture, and they should not be missed. It may help to acknowledge and thank them for keeping the culture active. The government should remember that they always contribute to our country. Second, there is the fact that the dams have caused a lot of damage in the environment. It is not only about the lands of indigenous people, but also affect a lot of animal habitats and forests. All natural resources have been destroyed because of dams. These resources can come back as easily as it will take time. The government should think of the animals that also need a place to live, and you can remove them like that. The forests are very important for the development of nature. They are the habitat of many animals, and also they give us regulation of water, CO2, raw materials, among others. It is difficult to give them back what they lost, but it is now to make the government understand that it has to stop building in places that really have life and are needed. In conclusion, it is important that not only the people that are affected fight for what they lost, but also we can make a change. A change can be by helping remind people that indigenous are important for our country and that they have rights too. Make an environmental change by demanding not to build in places that make nature get lost. Nature gives us a lot, and we can give them back by taking care of our surroundings.
Thank you very much for paying attention. This was a presentation about the polemic of the PhD key and every point of view. Thank you very much.